scene. Where are you today, Lynette? Tell us where you are so it gets everyone in the groove.
I'm in Sydney today.
You're in Sydney today. That's awesome. And we are just 1 minute past the hour. And I like to reward people for being on time, as you know. I think I've covered everyone. So what we're going to do is we'll wait for Sharon Stewart to get in the room now, and then we're going to kick off and get started. As Rachel is giving up her time graciously and beautifully for all of you today.
Hello, Moto.
Living a life with a full-hearted and deep passion. My God, if anyone's doing it, it is Rachel. Sharon, lovely to see you.
Thank you.
And another person. South Australia's pretty potent, I reckon, because we get some good women from South Australia. Have you noticed that, Brenda? Yeah. Although I think Queenslanders are pretty good. Okay, let's rock and roll. And we're going to go for around 45 minutes. That depending on if Rachel and I don't talk too much. And then we're going to take questions. And what I'll be asking you to do is unmute and ask Rachel the question, just so everyone knows how we're moving along here. All right. Everyone good with that?
Yep.
Let's just go, yep. Bit of action. Yep. Lovely. That's it. Okay. And as I said, you have all come here to hear Rachel. And as most of you know, I met Rachel in Paris earlier this year. And from the moment I met her, she was important to me in terms of she had a very good presence. She knew exactly what time of the day it was. She was a woman who was in charge of her destiny. And I knew that from the minute I met her. And I think she had a similar thing with me. We just met and we were kind of already in the groove, even though we didn't know each other. And I was fortunate to spend a bit of fun time as well with Rachel. And I feel privileged to have met you, Rachel. And I'm thrilled that you're joining us today from Las Vegas. And let me tell you a few things before we bring Rachel on. What can I say? She's an international speaker. She's a mentor. She is one powerhouse of a woman. She's making a difference all around the world. She's speaking all around the world, and she's given up her time today. I'm not going to say too much more about her because it'll all come out and what she's going to say. Rachel, it's something like 7 p.m. there in Las Vegas. How are you doing?
Great. It's only 7 p.m. here, so.
Yeah, that's right. How does it feel to be amongst all these powerful people, Rachel?
It feels amazing. Thank you all for coming in the room. We appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Rachel, let's kick off from a good starting point is you were born into a mixed race family. How did that impact your life? And tell us some more.
Well, again, being mixed, Mary, I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody who's in attendance tonight. I thank you guys that, Mary, again, when I met you in Paris, I was like, what would we have in common? But when she gave her keynote that was about, leaders who can connect, that really connected me to her. So growing up, there was a lot of disconnection because, again, I'm Black and I'm white. So everywhere that I went, regardless of whether I went with the white family or the Black family, I was very disconnected because nobody really knew how to handle me sometimes. I was raised in a very abusive home. So when my mother would go on one of her flings, I would be sent, to whichever family was willing to accept me at the time. So a lot of times that meant growing up with grandparents. So there's always that generational gap. So I'm so grateful, Mary, that you're such a young soul because we had such a good time. You would never know that, you're such a wise woman. And that's how I really reverence you. However, you just, you're down to earth. And my grandparents were very strict and old school, both my white grandparents and my Black grandparents. So there was just a not only an age gap, but just a generational gap sometimes, and so I would go with my white family or my white grandparents and I would never be white enough, and I would go with my Black family or my Black grandparents and I would never be Black enough, and there was never, I was just a kid still learning all these things, and it was just one of those things where not only was I confused, but it kind of confused them too, because they felt like I should have been more solid, and I should have known more about their culture, and I should have known more about their heritage or their family's legacy. And my mother's family has a very deep legacy within the state of Nevada. My uncle Ernest was the first police officer killed in the line of duty here. My my fifth great grandparents were the first Mormons that were married by Brigham Young, which is a huge, the Mormon culture in Utah. They came through with the pioneer generation, literally on wagon trails. There's a whole Mormon fort dedicated to this Mormon trail that went from Utah to Nevada. My grandfather was the first enforcer of the Gaming Commission when the mob was really big. So, there was a lot. He owned a casino called the Boulder Club that burnt down in the Horseshoe. It became the Horseshoe. So just such a family lineage and a family legacy. But as a young girl, I didn't know anything about that. I really only started realizing how important that was as I got older. But growing up, I didn't understand the family had a reputation to uphold. I had no idea what any of that meant. I just knew that my mom was at it again and I needed a place to live. And, my grandmother would open her door reluctantly because I tarnished the family's reputation being a colored child. The family had, they're blonde hair, blue eyed. They're my children are the seventh generation. So the first generation literally came off the Mayflower. So they are called the May family. So, they had a very white reputation to uphold. And so by having a colored grandchild, it threw a lot of things off for the family. It threw a lot of things off for the land deeds, for the things that should have lasted generational. They were removed from my mother because she had a child who was colored. She was instantly put out of her home. As soon as my grandmother saw me, my grandmother Margaret, the story that's told is she dropped me because they did not realize I was going to be a black child. Throughout the pregnancy, my mother had claimed she was pregnant by a white man, and I came out colored. And it was very, very devastating to my mother's family because of the legacy and the heritage and just how committed they were to keeping the lineage pure. And then my father's family, pretty much the same thing. It became a racial issue from day one. However, what they weren't going to do now that I was here was let my mother be alone and let my mother be homeless and let my mother be in the streets. So when her white family disowned her, it was my father's family who said, no, you come on in here. We'll adopt you. She was 17. She just turned 18 when she had me. So they had to literally adopt her. On their death certificate, it lists her as the adopted daughter. So they adopted her. She graduated school. She got a job as a waitress. There was no time to waste. We had a child now and we needed to take care of her. And that's all they thought about. That's all the McAllister family thought about, was the fact that there was a child involved and somebody had to help this child. And so my mother's side of the family just thought, oh my God, everything that we have worked so hard to obtain has now been ruined.
Wow. It's a lot for a little girl, isn't it, to be bouncing around in the different worlds. And once when we were talking, you said, well, it's quite a well-rounded perspective. And I found that a curious thing to say, but it made sense to me when you said it, Rachel, because a lot of people have no clue, and we certainly do not have a clue in this part of the world what exactly that might mean to be not white enough or not to be black enough, and then not know our identity of who we really are. And one of the things that I love when I read your book here, and we'll give you the link so you can purchase it on Amazon later, ladies and gents, but is that you've found your identity, you've found your purpose. The name of the book is From Pit to Purpose, and that says everything. Tell us about the pit version, if you like.
Well, the pit version had a lot to do with the cycles in my family that were continuously repeated. So teenage pregnancy, I got pregnant at 15 years old. Not only teenage pregnancy, but addiction, drug addiction, alcoholism, casinos. Obviously, I live in Las Vegas. So casinos are very big in my family. Not only were we casino owners and on the gaming commission, and my grandmother was the first blackjack dealer, in the state of Nevada. But that's all my mother knew, really, after being a waitress. Once she turned 21, it was all about casinos. And with casino comes a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs, a lot of men, a lot of things that children should never see. I'm an only child, so I was the only one to see it, because, again, there was no brothers or sisters to kind of bounce things off of. So it was just me, and I took the brunt of everything, not just the abuse, but also, the neglect, and also the rejection, and the sexual abuse that came from, men that came in the house, and all these different things. So it was just one of those things where the pit, the pit that I was in growing up was not a self-made pit at that time, but it was a pit that was just generational. Her mother was also an alcoholic. Her mother was addicted to pills. So, it was passed down to her, passed down to me. And ultimately the purpose in the pit became, the buck stops with me. It will not be my children or my grandchildren. And it has not been, by God's grace.
Wow, yes. And we know what it takes just to change each generation 1 or 2%. It's massive when you think about it. And now you've got children, and you know that you've been part of changing that generationally. It's really powerful. But it hasn't always been like that, has it, Rachel?
No, not at all.
So tell us, being pregnant at 15, what were the implications for you?
Well, I was a baby raising a baby. I was an only child, so it's not like I had younger siblings. I had never changed a diaper, never made a bottle. I pretty much raised myself since I was about 10 or so, but I still had all those baby things. I had no idea. I mean, my cousins, when I was tossed from family member to family member, my cousins were my age. So I never had any baby cousins, or I had no experience with the baby. So it was literally a baby raising a baby. And one of the pictures on the cover of my book is a picture of me with my first child. And when I look at the picture, I'm like, I looked 12. I looked so young, and it just brings back the memory of again, just trying to make it, trying to navigate life. My first thought when I found out I was pregnant was an abortion. I had no idea what I would do. And when I went to the abortion clinic, I heard my daughter's heartbeat on the abortion table, and I ran out of there, literally got up and ran. And I knew that it didn't matter what they tried to tell me. It was just a sack of multiplying cells. Anything with a heartbeat was living. And I didn't know. That was my first instinct, of course, was to not keep the child. I had no idea what was going to happen with my mother, who was already abusive. To tell her I was having a kid, she could beat this kid out of me. Like, I had no idea what was going to be the precipice when I went home. But ultimately, once I heard that heartbeat, I went home. I stole some pregnancy tests on the way back to my house. And I had already knew I was pregnant. My mother didn't know yet. So I was so scared and shaking so bad. She had to hold the pregnancy test under my urine, because I literally couldn't function. And, but I'll tell you what, having her, it was the greatest blessing for me and my mom. It brought us so much closer together. It changed the whole dynamic. My baby girl is a big blue-eyed, blonde-hair baby girl. So it allowed for my mother's family to come back into the picture, because now the blood wasn't wholly tainted. It wasn't all the way decimated. There was still some blonde hair, blue-eyed heritage somewhere in me. And so having this little girl really brought me back into the family on my mother's side, if I may, because it allowed them to see too that regardless of what the color of my skin was, I was still theirs, and the legacy and the heritage still lived on through me. And the proof was in my blonde hair, blue-eyed baby girl.
Wow, that's amazing. I haven't heard that part of your story. It's lovely. And so there you are, bringing up your daughter. What transpired next? What was another moment or the line in the sand?
Well, I live in Las Vegas. And when I turned 18, so I get pregnant at 15, I have my daughter by the time I'm 16. I started selling Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door. And I also moved to California, because in California, you get they have Section 8. You get a lot of government assistance. So they pay your rent, they give you food stamps, they give you a check for your child, they give you all these things that Nevada didn't do. And so I moved to California to get on this welfare system so I could finish school and, try to have some sense of normalcy. And that didn't work too well because, again, when you're dealing with generational plagues of alcoholism and drug addiction and being promiscuous and all these curses that just follow you, it's very hard to break away from those things. So I came back to Las Vegas and I worked at the Wet and Wild, like the water park, during the daytime as a lifeguard. But at nighttime, I was in a strip club. Again, I had a daughter to take care of. I had turned 18 by then, and in Vegas, that's really all. If you want to make money, you're either going to valet park cars or for our boys, we valet park cars, and for our girls, we were stripping at the time. And so, that was another reality that set in that, wow, now I'm a product of this environment that I had worked so hard to shake. And here I am, again, doing whatever it took to take care of this child and make ends meet. And ultimately, I met my son's father, who had done time in federal prison for pimping and pandering. I ended up having a son by him. And God, when I left him, I moved back to Reno, and then that's when literally all hell broke loose with the situation with my uncle, Mary.
So let's move to that day. You were celebrating with your family, your cousins, and you were celebrating some of their graduations, and there was stuff happening, and it was pretty full on. Tell us about just before that moment you realized you need to do something to shift the energy to make your cousins safe.
Well, before that, yes, there was somebody in our neighborhood who graduated from UNR, which is the major university out in Reno. And in my neighborhood, we don't graduate from high school, much less college, so this is a big deal. We went to this graduation party. Now, right before then, I had started going to church, and I had started doing good things and got baptized and was doing all these great things. Because another thing too, as I mentioned before, Mary, I was raised in the church on both sides of my family. So one side, my mother's side, who's white, they are Lutheran. And then my father's side is Apostolic Pentecostal. So that too is in the book. And it's a crazy thing being a young child and going to each church and trying to figure out, oh my God, is God real or are these people playing? It was a circus show sometimes, but the older now that I have my own relationship with God, I get it. But at the time, just being very young and two completely different cultures. So my mom's side, who's Lutheran, you sing out a hymnal book, you sprinkle a little water on your forehead, you get a rose, you do everything up, down, very uniform. But on my dad's side of the spectrum, they fall out, get the Holy Ghost, they sing at any time, like the pastor's preaching, and they're like, I want to testify. And I'm just like, oh my God, I thought people were dying. I had no idea what was going on around me in this Pentecostal movement. I was afraid. The church was very long at my father's side. My grandmother's side, my mother's side, 45 minutes tops. We were out of there. But on my dad's side, you're talking 4 or 5 hours. The church is hot. I'm hungry. We're just kids. There was no children's church on my dad's side. There was on my grandma's side. But on my dad's side, you sat in the adult sanctuary and you sat through it all. And so I had no idea if God was even real. But right before this graduation, I had started finding God for myself and really developing a relationship. And so we go to this graduation, and my cousin got in a fight. And the girl that my cousin got into a fight with, I actually call my baby's mother because her and I have daughters by the same guy. My daughter's father was a known drug dealer in the city of Reno. He has about 12 kids by 9 different women, but he was just a family friend. He wasn't like a boyfriend or anything. He was a family friend. And I had got drunk one night that, the very first time that I had ever had relations with the man, and I ended up pregnant. So there was never any animosity between me or the other women who had children by him because he was never like my boyfriend. He was just literally a family friend, and I happened to get pregnant by him. However, this woman that my cousin was fighting, I was very close to because our daughters were sisters. And so because I was very close to her, I didn't have any, I had no hard feelings towards her. I didn't have any beef with her, but my cousin did. And so her and her friends jumped my cousin at this graduation party, and I shot a gun in the air. And the bullet from that gun ended up, we were at a bowling alley, and the bowling alley had a metal bowling alley sign right above it. And when I shot that gun in the air, the bullet ricocheted off that metal sign, and it ended up killing my own uncle. So there was a crowd of about 150 people, maybe 200 according to the police report. And out of all those people, it was my uncle that bullet ended up hitting.
Yeah, pretty dramatic. And what happened? You took your cousin, unbeknown to you that bullet had ricocheted and killed your uncle. Well, it critically wounded him, I think, didn't it? And then you race off in the car, and when you get home or back to your cousins, you then learn about your uncle. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Then what happened? You decided to do what?
Well, I decided to go to the hospital where he was. They left me at the apartment and said, you can't go. And I, so we walk into the house. So my cousin gets in the car. The whole idea behind shooting the gun was to disperse the crowd. Everybody was gathered around her. I couldn't get into the middle of the crowd to get to her. So the whole gunshot was just to get rid of the crowd. Once the crowd was gone, we pulled her into the car. Once she was in the car, we just immediately drove off. And leaving, we passed the ambulance that was on its way to pick up my uncle, who was bleeding out on the curb back at the bowling alley that we didn't know. When we got to my aunt's house, where my cousin and I both stayed at the time, my aunt said, we have to go to the hospital. Something happened. Your uncle's been hurt. And I was like, oh my God, I shot the gun. I shot this gun. I shot a gun. I had never shot a gun before. I had no intention on ever shooting one again ever in my life. And ultimately I shot that gun. She said, you stay here. We're going to go to the hospital. We're going to see what's going on. So when she left, her and my cousin left together, and some more people came over to the house, and I was like, we have to get to the hospital. So they drove me up to the hospital, and the hospital had been surrounded by police. The police understood that this was a shooting, and that's, somebody had shot a gun, and they did understand that person may be en route to the hospital, because they did think that it was a family member. And so they had surrounded the hospital. When I pulled up to the hospital, they asked the driver what his name was. He gave his ID, his driver's license, and gave them his name. And the police on my side said, what's your name? And I said, Rachel. And they said, Rachel what? And I was like, Rachel McAllister. And they were like, put your hands out, get on the ground, put your hands where I could see them. And they dragged me out of the car and threw me on the floor and handcuffed me. And by now I see all my other cousins crying and falling to their knees. And I picked up on what was happening, obviously, because everything around me told me what was going on. And in the car, I kept asking the officer, did my uncle die? Did my uncle die? And ultimately, I was charged with, murder for that incident. And I was booked on first-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon into the jail.
And just to fill in a little bit of a gap there, this was a jury, everyone. This is a jury that Rachel was found guilty. Imagine that, an accident. And then the judge decided to take the lead, and the judge then made a decision. And what did he decide, Rachel?
He decided to overturn that. He decided to overturn the verdict. Well, I was found guilty. Ultimately, I was booked into the jail on first-degree murder, premeditated murder. I ended up being found guilty 200 days later or so of second-degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon. And one of the reasons the jury claimed they found me guilty was because the key word for second-degree murder is the word malice. And so the district attorney kept saying Rachel had malice in her heart because of the way she was raised. She had this hatred for the world in her heart because of the abuse that she went through when she was young, because of the physical abuse, because of the sexual abuse, because of being raped, because of her children's father, because of her mother, because of her own father. She has always had this malice in her heart. And yes, this bullet may have killed her uncle, but Rachel set out to kill somebody that night because of this malice she had in her heart. And it didn't matter what the evidence said. The evidence said there was paint on the tip of the bullet. So obviously the bullet hit the sign that we said it hit. All of the witnesses said Rachel's never even been in a fight, much less killed anybody. And it didn't matter what the evidence said. That was the key word for second degree murder, was the word malice. And that's ultimately the jury found me guilty of second degree murder with the use of a deadly weapon.
And how long did you stay incarcerated for?
I was locked up for 222 days altogether, but I was facing 2 life sentences, one for the murder, and then in the state of Nevada, we have something called a weapons enhancement. So it doubles whatever sentence you get. So it would have been a life sentence for the murder and also a life sentence for using a weapon during that crime.
So the judge overturned the verdict and you got to go home for Christmas. And then what was in front of you? There was going to be a retrial, and that would have meant how many years in prison while you wait for that? Was it something like 10 years? Is that right?
12 years suspended sentence, yes.
So you would have had to stay in jail for another 12 years while you got sorted for a retrial. And there was another option, and you took the other option. Tell us what that option was, Rachel.
The other option was to plead guilty to manslaughter. It was a crime that is committed in the heat of passion or at the spur of the moment. And so I did plead guilty to manslaughter. I had never been in trouble before. Before I got locked up, I was a teacher at the YMCA. So I'd had no record. So it was a probationable crime. Manslaughter was. So by me pleading guilty to manslaughter, it gave, first of all, it saved my family from going through another trial. It saved my children from having to go back and forth to family members, because as my family were testifying at the trial, my children would have to find a place to stay because my family was keeping my kids at the time. So it saved my children from having to be shuffled around, and it saved me obviously from having to go back in and wait for another trial. So pleading guilty to manslaughter and just getting probation was the most reasonable option for me at the time.
Isn't that interesting? You're listening to the words, the most reasonable option. But it's a conviction nonetheless that you've had to live with, had difficulty travelling, passport. It's massive implications with having that stamped on you for forever. And here we are, is it 30 years later, talking about this and how it's impacted your life. And after that, when you realise this is the state of things, what kind of decisions did you make about your life, Rachel? It's pretty grim.
Yes, because once I got out of jail, I realized what I had done, right? My family loved me to death, and I had been a part of this family. It happened when I was 21 years old. I had been a part of this family, this is my dad's side of the family, for 21 years. And they were the ones who took my mother in with a colored child. They never segregated or discriminated against me in any way like my mother's side did. So I could just not all of a sudden not show up. I still have to go to family barbecues. I still have to go to family reunions. I can't just not come around anymore. It's a family that I was raised with. And my uncle who passed away, he had 6 children, and he was the only living son of my grandmother. My aunties, he had 4 sisters, so he's the only brother. I mean, he's the only man who ever bought my children diapers and never asked for sex in return. Like, he was our everything. He was the man of the family. He was the protector. He was the provider. And I had not yet lived without him. My family had lived now for almost a year without him. And I had not yet. I had not seen him at the family functions yet. I had not picked up the phone at 3 a.m. because he was a drinker sometimes, and he would call just to say I loved you at about 3, just I'm thinking about you, and we're like, we are sleeping. Just random things that I hadn't experienced without him yet. And so I just lost my mind. I was physically not incarcerated, but mentally I was still incarcerated 100%.
That's, you were certainly imprisoned in your own mind, and other people had an opportunity to recover a little bit maybe. There's a lot of healing, but How did the whole forgiveness thing work, Rachel? Like, how do you go out and mix with his children? You know, how did that all work? And your grandmother?
Well, my family is old school, so they call, the older generation calls the shot. So if my grandmother and my grandpa said, no, Rachel is going to be around, then the cousins didn't have a say so anyway. And even though they were hurting, they knew I was hurting too. We were all hurting because we lost Uncle Pinky, but I was hurting because I did it. And so they lashed out, right? Of course, now we're doing things as a family or having what we call Sunday dinner at Big Mama's house. And, there were times drinking got involved. And of course, they go off on me and, they want to tell me. And you never said sorry. You never apologized. And I'm like, I don't know how to apologize. Like it was, so forgiveness came in stages, Mary. And I think as they got older, they were able to really know that, the older cousins were always like, we would have done it too. We 100% would have shot that gun as well. If it wasn't you, it would have been us. We would have never let Shantae, so my cousin has a scar across her neck where the girl had sliced her with a razor blade. One of the girls had sliced her with a razor blade. So to this day, she has a keloid across her neck. And so they know that the story is true. They know that had I not shot that gun, that our own cousin would have been the one laying in her own pool of blood somewhere. So they hear it, but they weren't living, they didn't live through it. And so, the other cousins are like, it would have been us all day long, but his children were younger. And so they didn't really get it at the time. So forgiveness came in stages, Mary, and I usually took the brunt of the stages because I caused it.
Yeah, that's right. And so this greatly impacted, well, the whole environment and being in jail for that long, and you've got children, and, how did that take a toll on your mental health? I know it did. And there was a point at your lowest point. Tell us about that, Rachel.
Well, again, I was still incarcerated mentally. And so I became, a drinker. I started drinking really heavy. There were times I would drink before, maybe like a martini or a Sex on a Beach or a fruity drink before. But now I was like down in triple shots of Hennessy, and I was taking ecstasy pills because I couldn't cry on ecstasy. I was snorting cocaine, all the things that I just didn't really succumb to before. I was more of the drug dealer, not the dope fiend or the drug addict. I was more of like, I always saw myself as a little more, I saw myself a little more sedity, a little more uppity than a lot of the people around me. And I became what in my neighborhood we call the gutter. And again, my mental health took a huge toll, and death was the only option, as I mentioned to you yesterday, Mary, that I had to be able to get out of it. I didn't know how to. I tried to move away from my hometown. I'm from Reno, so I tried to move back to Las Vegas. Like, hey, I'm going to shake it all. I'm going to get away from my family because they're all in Reno. I'm going to transfer my probation out to Vegas. I'm going to start over where nobody knows me, and I'm going to just go out here with my kids, and I'm going to start fresh. And I got to Las Vegas, and again, I couldn't get housing because of my background. I couldn't find a job because of my background, daycare, my credit. I couldn't get a car. I just came out here and everywhere I went, I still was. And so the guilt and the shame was always there. And there was nothing that I could do to shake that. And I thought death was going to be the only way out.
And at that point, when you were ready to give it all up and to die, there was an intervention, if you like. There was a God moment. And just tell us a little bit about that. I think that's a very powerful moment in your life.
Well, I was going to pick up 400 ecstasy pills from my from the connection. He said, when you get off the freeway on Cheyenne, you're going to make a right. You'll see a street called Civic Center. I got off the freeway. I made a right, and it was a street called Rainbow. And where I'm from, you don't just drive around neighborhoods asking for directions. That's not how it works in our neighborhoods. So you have to get directions, or you might get your car stolen and get your throat slit. So I wasn't going around asking for directions. I pulled up to a car wash. At the time, there were not cell phones. We had pagers, but not. So I had to use a payphone. And so I pulled up to the gas station, and at the gas station, there was a church called Victory Outreach. And Victory Outreach, they were having a car wash there. And the young man who came up and asked if he could wash my car, I had already written a letter before this that said, when you find this letter, that means I'm dead. I need my 2 children to go with my mother, who was addicted to crack cocaine at the time. But she was a lot more stable, I felt like, as opposed to their 2 fathers who were jumping all, here, there, and everywhere. So I had already written a suicide letter. I had already, in my mind, died. And my body just needed to follow as far as I was concerned. So I pull up to this gas station, use the payphone. They're having a car wash there. And at that car wash, there was a young man who had a teardrop tattoo. And so in my neighborhood, when you have a teardrop tattoo, that usually means you took a life already. And so he looked at me and he said, can we wash your car? And I was like, whatever, again, just don't touch the inside is what I told him. And he said, you know what? I want to tell you something. It doesn't matter what pit you're in. There's no pit deep enough so far down that God's hand cannot reach down and pull you out of it. And so when I was in jail, I served God. I was raised in the church. So I was in jail. I started reading my Bible. I started praying. I started praying for people. They were getting probation. They knew they should have went to prison. I saw so many miracles when I was in jail. And then me getting out and never going to prison after being convicted of murder was a miracle in itself. And then I let God down. I started doing drugs. I started doing alcohol. I couldn't believe that I had just turned my back on God who had just performed all these miracles and did so much for me. He restored my children to me, like everything that I should never even have for at least one of my life sentences, which you have to do 20, 25 years and then you parole into the next life sentence for another 20 or 25 years. I should still be sitting in prison, and God set me free. And here I am acting up and, getting high and doing all these things. And I said, man, God will never forgive me. But when this young man with the teardrop tattoo told me that there was no pit that I was in that was so deep that God's hand was not long enough to pull me out of, I knew he knew the pain that I felt because I saw that teardrop on his eye. So I knew that he knew. Nobody else could have spoken those words to me. I don't care what your background would have been. If you did not take a life, there's no way I could have heard that from you. And so there was this young man, and that's what he said. And there was something in me that was like, you must know, because you've got to, I see the teardrop. So if you're saying this, I never made that phone call to my Connect. I ended up at the Victory Outreach Church, which is where a lot of drug addicts, gang members, and prostitutes go. Being raised in church, I never saw these people in any of the churches I attended. None of my families attended churches with these kind of people. Nobody had teardrop tattoos or tattoos at all in the churches I attended. And so when I walked into this room full of people who looked like me, who had stories like me, but more importantly, had lives that I one day wanted to have and could only dream of, I knew at that very moment that things were going to change. And I knew it then, that I had set out to die that day, and I thought it would be physically, and it ended up being spiritually.
Wow, so impactful. If we can, because I want people to have an opportunity to ask you questions in a minute, but tell us the work you're doing now. You're helping women who have been incarcerated. Tell us about that work. I think it's very powerful work, and it's also impacting many lives, and people need to know what you're doing, Rachel.
Yes, I help formerly incarcerated people, primarily women, get their lives back. I help them navigate the system to get their children back, to get proper housing, to be able to get jobs, to get their records sealed, to get driver's licenses, birth certificates, the thing. Because when you come out of jail, you usually have nothing. Everything was gone in your storage unit. Everything was gone in the house you stayed in, and people robbed you when you got locked up. Like, there is nothing. And so I help formerly incarcerated people get their lives back so that they're able to get out and, stay out, not just, and more importantly, I go into the prisons and I start with the women in there right now. We're starting already. We're doing parenting classes. We're building resumes. We're doing, even if they never hire you, what business are you going to build? Even if you can't get that job, that's fine. What has God put in your heart to do? What were you birthed to do? What are you passionate about? What would you do every day and not need anybody to pay you a penny for? That's what we start building these business plans around, and we start getting them to dream dream again. And everything is not about I get out and I'm going back to my old community, in my old neighborhood, with my old friends, doing the old things I used to do. Now I have a pen pal program. So myself and other chaplains are writing the women in the prison. So they're already building relationships. So when they come out, they have solid people that they can go to, who have resources, who have opportunities for them, who are waiting for them really at the gate to be able to lift them up and help them out of their neighborhoods, help them out of those old family members. You know, a lot of times it's the people around you closest to you that are the ones who bring you down. And so you just need a new group of friends. And once you can get a new group of friends, you can get a new life. And so I'm very, very passionate about making sure that these people have jobs and that they can take care of their families. So I work with the staffing agency, or I've partnered with the staffing agency just recently called SUNS. It's called See Us Now Staffing, SUNS. And we are, I was with Hope for Prisoners, but Hope for Prisoners, I'm no longer with them, because Hope for Prisoners, I had to hire everybody. And everybody's not hireable right away. That's just the truth, right? Everybody's not ready to get a job yet. It's one thing to be out of jail, but it's another thing to actually be ready to hold down a 40-hour-a-week job and really have those responsibilities. When you've been locked up for 10, 15, 20 years, you have some other work to do. And a lot of it, again, has to do with the mind and the mentality. So being at Hope for Prisoners was very rewarding, but I felt like a lot of times the jobs hurt people more than it helped them. So now being at this staffing agency, I'm really able to place people who are ready to be employed into their future destinies. And that's what I'm passionate about doing.
And also, if I understand correctly, and this is a big distinction from what you're saying, you actually approach companies, and the company you work for have taken some of these women on and employed them and given them jobs, and you're actually out actively looking for companies like the company you work for. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So through the staffing agency, we've been able to go out. It's called Second Chance Hiring, and we go out to the community, and I literally just go canvass the community, and I say, who's willing to give second chances? You know, just take the risk on people. And we're able to really, really get a lot of buy-in from the community. I was just at a breakfast this morning with the sheriff and the governor and just all the communities bought into it. We do a lot with the mayor. There's something called a faith-based initiative now in our city. So we've really been able to move the scale the way that casinos and different businesses look at second chance hiring. We've really been able to do a lot of work with. And so we have a lot of buy-in from the city now, and from other business owners within the community. So now the staffing agency I'm with is actually national. So there are different reentry organizations that are reaching out and saying, hey, I have a reentry organization in, Utah or Arizona. And, we'd love to be able to partner with you guys to help, staff other places. And so when the, like Amazon, for example, Amazon is not just in Nevada. There's Amazon warehouses almost in every state in the nation. And so when Amazon partners with us, we have the ability to get people in all other 50 states or 52 states jobs because of that partnership. So it's really something that's evolving daily right now. But the ultimate goal and the big vision is that nationally we'll be able to continue to staff second chance jobs everywhere.
It's such a great thing that you're doing. You inspire me listening again to your story, Rachel. And let's go to everyone that has sat and listened for the first time to this story. I've been privileged to hear it a few times, and I learned so much from you, Rachel. Every moment. I was just thinking this morning, listening about gratitude, and I need more gratitude in my life. Just listening to you, it's just been a wonderful message. So any questions or even comments to Rachel, just unmute. Everyone knows how to unmute, and just ask your question. Brenda, you've unmuted. Go for it.
Yeah, Rachel, you've gone through judgment. You've gone through a life of lots of adversity, and now you're doing such a wonderful job. I also am a chaplain at the prison, and I know what the things that women, especially, I can only talk for women because I only go to the women's side of the prison. They are actually frightened of going back into their community because of everybody expecting them to be exactly the same as what they were. So your program, I'd love to know a lot more about it. I mean, we do have programs here to help women but basically when they leave those doors and walk back into the world, they are really by themselves. So I'd love to know a lot more about what your program is.
Beautiful.
I can connect you ladies up through WhatsApp. That's no problem, Brenda.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you for presenting today. It's been such a wonderful experience. In fact, I thought I was back at the prison there for a little bit, but yeah, thank you.
I just want to thank you too, Brenda, for the work that you do, because I know how important the chaplains are inside the prison. What a safe place, a place of refuge that the chaplains provide for the women in the prison. When I was locked up, I got my first Bible from the chaplain in the prison. And then when I got out, she took me to a women's conference. She was just, so I just want to thank you for the work that you do. Sometimes it can feel like I don't really even have anything in common with the women, but it's the love of Christ that compels people to change, and the love that people who don't have backgrounds, when they come in and they're volunteering their time or even being paid to be there, when you come in and you just love on us, it allows for us to see that it doesn't really matter, what your background is. The fact that you just love unconditionally is who we want to be like. So thank you for being a light in the prison where it's so dark, Brenda. We appreciate that.
Thanks, Rachel.
Who else has got a question? Thank you, Brenda. Yes, Denise.
Hi, Rachel. Lovely to hear your story, and wow, what a journey you've travelled from beginning to where you are now. I'm not going to say to the end, beginning to where you are now, and yeah, I could read between the lines with a lot of things that you said there, because I think the story could, you could tell it in a lot more depth than what you have shared with us today. And kudos to you for getting to where you are now, in terms of what you're doing. You did mention you've got 2 children, is that correct?
I have 5 now. I've been married to my husband about 22 years. So I have 5 children, and now I have grandchildren.
Oh, beautiful. So my question to you, in terms of, I just sort of heard about the 2 children just through your journey. You were talking about the 2 children. How are those children, as we sit today, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, in terms of themselves having sort of been born so early, sort of watched this whole transition and your life journey, how are they as individuals today?
Well, despite the fact that both of their parents were incarcerated, both of my children, my 2 older children, now the 3 children I have with my husband, we've had a 2-parent home, and we've been able to raise our children together. And he also raised the other 2 as well. But the 2 children who had both of their parents formerly incarcerated are amazing human beings. One of them is actually a missionary in South Africa, reaching other gang members and drug addicts and prostitutes in Cape Town, South Africa, with her husband and my 3 grandchildren. My son is married to a woman from Thailand. They just had a little Thailandian baby, a little Thai baby. So they call me the grandmother of nations now, because I have all these such diverse. If my mother's family was still alive, they'd probably kill me, because our whole family now is really, we're so diverse, and it's such a beautiful rainbow of just amazing possibilities. So those 2 older children are absolutely very, very, talk about well-rounded. They've seen the best of both worlds and the worst of both worlds. But yet that's what makes their story so much stronger, because they're able to say, I did not go through those things. You know, I married my husband 22 years ago. We didn't even kiss before we were married, much less do anything else. So we have a very pure testimony. So the change in my life was 100% genuine. And that's really all my children know. They were very young. It was 5 days before my daughter's 5th birthday that I was incarcerated. And so she was a little older. There was a little animosity by the time I came back when she was about 9. But for my son, he was very young. He was 9 months old. He literally remembers none of it. And so all they know is the love that we have shown them, you know, their whole lives. And so they're very, very, they're just amazing young people. They're both married. They both have children. And, you know, I couldn't be happier with the way the curse is broken, Denise. I'll tell you that. They're not drug addicts. They're not gang members. They're not alcoholics. They're not sleeping around. They're nothing that I was, my mother was, my grandparents were. My children are definitely a cut from a different cloth, and I'm very grateful that they've been able to be raised in the home that they were raised in.
Beautiful. And I think it is and it's beautiful to hear. I think it's about you've got to break that cycle, because cycles will repeat. Look, I know from things that have happened and transpired in my life, but without cycles somebody has to break that cycle. Somebody has to stand up and break that cycle. And yeah, when you've got children in tow, you're the one that has to break that cycle. There is no other way it's going to happen. And it takes a lot of courage and guts to do that. And that is the only way forth for them if the cycle is broken. Otherwise, it will repeat. There's no question in my mind, you're proof of it. It will repeat itself, you know, because the cycle hasn't been broken. So I was just curious as to, you clearly have broken the cycle. You've mentioned that, and I've seen that. I just wanted to see what the outcome was from the children's perspective. I have a daughter of my own, so I was just wondering, you know, how that went for you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, you know, we become what we see, not what we want to be. I never wanted to be. Everything I saw, I did not want to be, but I did not know how to be anything else, because it's all I saw. And so again, I married an amazing man of God who has been, we don't call him a stepdad. He was a stepped up dad. So when my two children's fathers stepped out, he stepped in and he stepped up and he cared for my children as his own. And so my son, whose father was, went to prison for pimping, he is a husband. He is not a jigaboo. He doesn't sleep around and have all these girlfriends. He's a husband to one woman. He has a daughter with her. And again, that's because of the exampleship that my husband was able to give my son. This is 22 years that my husband and I have been married, so our children don't really know anything else. So it's a beautiful thing that they got to see what real love is. I saw a lot of abuse. I saw my mom, abused by the men she was with, and then they'd turn around and abuse me. And so my relationships in the beginning were very abusive as well. But once I got with my husband, my children never saw that. So they don't, when I tell them stories, even reading my book, they don't even want to read it because they can't believe it. They're like, there's no way. Like, it's so sad. We don't want to read those sad things happen to you and grandma, because my mother lives with me now. She's been with me for 20 years. I married my husband and we instantly brought my mom into safety and rescued her from a horrible relationship that she was in yet again. And she's been in here in 20 years. We've refurbished the whole garage, and she's like, I'll die here. She's never had the peace she's had. So, I'm her only child. I'm all she has. So at the end of the day, it's my responsibility, I believe, to make sure that my mother is safe. She couldn't provide that for me, but I've been able to provide that for her, and it's been a blessing.
Beautiful. Thank you.
It's just, you can tell, can't you, that the more Rachel speaks, the more inspiring it is, hopefully, for everyone here. Any more questions? Just unmute and ask away. There's nothing that Rachel will fob off. She's very direct like I am, and she's up for any questions. Who else has got a question? Must be something there. There's been too much shared for no questions.
Oh, I mean, I don't have any questions, but again, I agree with Denise and everyone. I mean, the mould does need to be broken. I know in my experiences, and with I'm a single mother. I was married, but I ended up a single mother. But yeah, just broke that mould. I'm not bringing my daughter up the way I was brought up. And she's grown up a beautiful, independent young woman who's now living in the UK. She's over here in Australia at the moment. But it just has to be that one person to just break that, to change, and that could change a whole generation,
Yeah.
as you've proved with your children and grandchildren. So just having that wisdom to be able to do that, and the courage.
Yeah. And the
It does
community,
take
Sharon.
courage.
And the community, to
And
be honest,
community.
Sharon. Yeah, because
It takes a village to bring up a
yes.
child.
And the women who
It certainly
surrounded
does.
me, when I first went into the church, the women who surrounded me, the single moms who surrounded me, like you said, you mentioned you're a single mom, the women who really surrounded me, they started saying, hey, you're going to get your kids back. I had lost my children up at that time. You're going to get your kids back. You're going to be a wife one day. You know, they started teaching me how to cook. All the things my mother never taught me, the women in the church started teaching me. They started speaking life to me, where death had always been, but you'll only be like your mother, you'll never be anything, you know, all those things that I lived up to. Now these women were speaking things that I was going to live up to. And I am a wife now, and I am a mother, and I do cook, and I, you know, all those things. So the community, Sharon, is really what I could have never, ever, ever got to the place that I am, not only today, but even the place where I felt even able to take care of my children genuinely as a single mom, without the community of other women around me saying, hey, you're not really a single mom. You're a single mom, but you're not alone. And that was very important.
That's
so.
it. And there's something you just cannot do it on your own. And that's why Mary has her cheer squad too.
Yes.
But having these other women in a community to help lift you,
Yes.
that's where we need to be lifted and then push forward. That's
Yes.
what I believe.
To fly, not to
Thank
fall,
you.
though. Thank
No,
you.
not at all. Thank
Yes.
you.
That's lovely. Jennifer, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, for your story. Packed an awful lot into your life so far. My question is, how has the change in your life affected the rest of your family that you grow up in? What's been the impact on that side of your family?
Well, now it's been almost 30 years, but in the beginning, it was very hard because I never wanted them to think I forgot, but I needed to be able to forgive myself, number one, and to know that whether they forgave me or not almost was irrelevant. Because if I constantly lived my life hoping they would forgive me one day, I would never live my life. That's how come I ended up almost killing myself, because I could never make anybody happy enough. And anything I did, it was always so scary because there had to be a balance. I didn't want them to think that I was having fun because I had a smile on my face, or that, you know, I wasn't remorseful, or, you know, it was such a balancing act. And so again, my family now is 100, all his children reach out to me, my uncle's children. They now have children. I was on the phone with one of his daughters the other day, giving her resources for her sons. Like, now they know that I'm a bridge, I'm a pillar, I have a lot of resources, I do a lot in the community, that I'm able to help them, and they love it. You know, they genuinely are proud of me. It took me about 10 years to actually come out with a book, because I never wanted them to think that I was trying to profit off of their father or whatever, because the only thing that happened to me was not the fact that I accidentally killed my uncle, by far. They didn't even know most of the stuff that ever went on in my life. So when they read the book, their uncles, their dad's story is one chapter. So it's not even it's not a real big book, but the point of the book is all these things happened to you in the beginning, but these are the things I do with it now. And so it wasn't even a book that goes real in depth about a whole lot of stuff. It literally kind of skims over some stuff, just because I'm making the point that whatever our mess has been, when we put a little age on it and a little bit of time, it becomes a message. And we could take that message back to people who are where we once were, and we can pull them up so that they don't have to stay there, just like other people pulled me up. And so his kids get it now. My family, the older generation, has always loved me. Most of them have died off now. My grandma's passed away. My grandfather's passed away. His 4 sisters are still living, though. And so, again, it just has become something that they're just so proud of me. They didn't understand everything that I went through, even getting out. They didn't understand. They're like, they couldn't believe I got on drugs and I started drinking, and here you are, you're out of jail. We would have left you in a physical prison if we knew you were going to do all this. They didn't understand what was going on mentally until the book. And now there's just a lot more compassion, a lot more camaraderie, and, a lot more unity. We're much more unified now. And they're
Wow,
very proud of
that's
me.
I'm sure they are. My goodness. Brenda.
Rachel, I think underneath it all, there's been a thread of love within your life. The act that you did that killed your uncle was actually from an act of love of your cousin. And so all these other things of drugs and alcohol and all the things that you've done were things that probably that you were reaching out for, to see what else is there to life, I suppose. But also, I see that you've been very open-hearted, and I think that these are the values that we can take from your story. Is that thread of love, and obviously you've got love in your life now for the last 20 odd years, and which is a beautiful thing. So yes, it's been a wonderful story.
Thank you.
Sometimes we have to go through these adversities to know what the other side of things are.
Yes, and I didn't look at it like that, but you know what, Brenda, you're 100% right. Everything that I did in love, and everything that my family's ever done for me has always been done in love. And so you're right. The underlying factor in my whole story has been love. And despite what the surface looks like, because some may say this is bad, that's good, this is bad. I always say I was a young girl looking for love in all the wrong places. And so you're 100% right, Brenda. The underlying factor has always been love. Thank you for that revelation.
Yes, that's Brenda. We've hit the hour, and like any of my sessions, if someone's sitting on a question or a comment, now's the time to speak, because we are going to wind up in a couple of minutes. I know we're just over the hour, and I don't want to take any more of everyone's time, particularly Rachel there with her whole family in the background. Is there anyone that's got a burning question? I don't want you to leave here today with a burning question. If you want to ask it, now's your moment. We're done? Okay. Well, Rachel, you're quite a remarkable woman, and I'm so pleased and thrilled that I've met you, and I know we'll have way more conversations. And for everyone, Rachel's story in more depth, and my podcast will go live at the end of June. You'll all know about it because you're all on my mailing list, and you'll get the notification. I urge you to go in and share it with everyone. Rachel, thank you so much for what you're doing, particularly with women. It's absolutely, I don't know, it's a real deepening of the heart for me, and what you're doing, and the difference that you're making, and the difference that you can make. You're a young woman still, you know. I'd love to be around in another 30, 40 years to see what you actually do, because in some ways it's early days, but you're an international speaker, you're sharing your story, you're more than mentoring these women, you're actually mothering them and caring for them, and like Brenda said, love is everywhere. Thanks so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for being part of this special event. I really appreciate it.
And
Thanks, Rachel.
Can I say something
Mary.
real quick? Thank you guys for listening, because if nobody's listening, then there's really no space to tell the story. So Mary, I so appreciate you opening up this international opportunity for me, and I thank all of you for coming on and just listening and being present, because if you don't show up, I still have a story, but nobody gets to hear it. So thank you for being present and just being here. And Mary, thank you so much for providing this space. I thank you guys, and again, I make myself available if you need anything. Mary knows how to get a hold of me, and I'm always willing to speak or do whatever you need me to do. It's what I do, and I can't wait to come to Australia and visit.
Yes, and I'll make sure everyone's got the link if you want to buy Rachel's book. Let's end on that note. Thank you very much, everyone.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Thank you
Rachel.
guys.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Rachel.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
I appreciate you
Thanks,
guys.
Bye.
God bless you.
Back in.
Yee-hee.